Hey everyone. Well, I guess the first question is probably no hat. So people were wondering, because I do so many presentations with this goddamn hat, that people think that I'm actually bald or have a wig under it. So this talk is actually now more relevant than it was a few weeks ago when I started writing it. I promise I didn't write this last minute. It's actually an iteration of a talk that I've been doing for a few months now at different conferences, and this is the most expanded one. And the relevance of this one is, in pure financial terms, in terms of ROI, in terms of return on investment. Because a lot of studios are doing content-heavy games, working with very large teams, and making very expensive products. And quite often they're working on new intellectual property, which makes the odds of success increasingly more difficult. That's why we see, like, I'm not sure if you've seen the Game of the Year Awards nominees, none of them are new. Like, most of those IPs are at least 15 years old. Anyway, let's start going. I have a timer here, that is no pressure, absolutely. So hi, I'm Alex Nichiporchik. I run tinyBuild. We're a game developer and publisher, known for a lot of different games and different styles, namely Hello Neighbor, Speedrunner, Streets of Rogue, and I could go down the list of 80 different titles. I started my career as a professional gamer, failed miserably, then got into journalism, failed miserably, and then somehow I became a game producer / marketing guy, and now we're here, talking about games that you can play infinitely. Now, there is an expanded version. Oh my God, this is so bright. There is an expanded version of this talk with a lot of videos. It's on tinyBuild.com. I recommend you read it and watch the videos I've embedded there, because it gets quite interesting. And then also I did a subsection of this talk is about emerging gameplay, which I won't touch upon in detail, but there is a video on DevGAMM's YouTube channel from last summer where I talk about emerging gameplay. So snap a picture of this if you want to take a look at that, or just search for my name on YouTube. You'll find a lot of interesting videos and me mixing cocktails on the stage at different DevGAMMs. So what the hell is 1,000 hours, right? Well, if you do the math, and I hope I did this right, I'm sure someone on YouTube right now is commenting that I made a mistake in my calculations, but it's essentially, if you play full-time 8 hours a day, it's 125 days, or 6 months of full-time playtime, right? And why do I think it's important, and how do we do that? Those are the two main questions that we're going to be exploring in this chat. Well, it's an empty slide. Well, if I look at our top 10 in our portfolio, I see 4 games constantly there. I see Speedrunners, which we released 10 years ago. It was in August, it turned 10. I see Streets of Rogue, which is a phenomenal roguelike game. I see Secret Neighbor, and I see a game that we acquired recently called Dead Side. And in our top 10, that means revenues, right? So that means user engagement and whatnot. And if I go to any one of those games, I will find reviews like this one. I'm not sure if you can see the number over here, but this guy played 1,900 hours and says, yeah, it's okay. That's pretty good ROI for a $20 game. I believe this is for, speedrunners. And then occasionally I will stumble upon reviews like this. 3,500 hours, which is, if you play 4 hours per day, that's 2.5 years every fucking day. Why is that important? Well, first off, there is a direct correlation between games where people can spend thousands of hours in and longevity of sales. Because games like Speedrunners, I believe the last meaningful update was like 7 years ago. Game is still selling like hot pancakes. And this is really important in the context that we are competing for people's time today. Before things like Game Pass, we were competing with Netflix, with television, with books, with healthy life choices. Now we're competing with everything. We have subscription services, we have our phones buzzing, and your grandma figuring out TikToks and new meme, and sometimes actually pretty good. And it's all about how do you make sure that people will spend time in your product and not in someone else's product. And now we need to remember that we don't live in a time anymore where you have to like commit to. I'm not sure if any of you here have went to like a midnight release of a game, like camping out at Best Buy or an equivalent store, waiting for Halo 3 to release. No hands. Yeah, I've done that once. It was a lot of fun, but you're committed to that product, right? Here, it's all available instantly. It's all available just at the snap of your finger. And that creates a lot of challenges for us. And what I'm seeing is what you want to see is something like this in your Steam admin. This is a snapshot from one of our games. I'm not going to say which one, but what I see within those top 10 games is this kind of time distribution. You see a lot of people playing for just a little bit, right? 0-1 hour. Then there is a significant drop off, and then a lot of people are over there at the very end. And all of the games that I mentioned have this correlation. So hopefully you understand why. Money. I like money. The how is much more difficult, and it can go into different directions. Warren Spector did a really interesting talk this morning that touched upon a lot of those emerging gameplay systems and how to approach these style of games. Well, the simplest way to introduce you to this, and first I'm going to talk more on theory, and then I'm going to try and explain to you a couple of games that I spend ridiculous amounts of time in. But the basic premise is think systems instead of content. And by content, if we use example of levels, it's very simple math, right? You go, you have 10 levels, that is 10 hours. Therefore, well, wait, did I make a mistake here? Yeah, I did. Okay, we have one level that is 1 hour, then 10 levels is 10 hours, therefore 1,000 levels will be 1 hour. So then let your project manager calculate how many people you need to create 1,000 levels, and then hire 2,000 people and then work for 3 years, and then you're going to have a game that gives you 1,000 hours. Easy, right? 1 second. But reality is, this kind of approach, I believe, is also why we are in a situation that we are with so many layoffs happening in the industry, is because when you do math like this, you have a lot of production scale, you have a lot of risk, and I don't like this approach personally. What I propose is a thought exercise here, where let's say we do, oh my God. Yeah, so if we have 10 levels, there we go. I'm just really confused by my own animations here. So let's say that we have 10 levels, right? We add level number 11, that adds 10%. We add number 12, that actually adds 9%. And then we add number 13, which adds 8.3%. Again, someone in the YouTube comments cite me on the math. But you essentially get diminishing returns, right? The alternative to this, if you do a systems-driven approach, is a little bit different, because let's say that you have 10 systems in your game, and you add system number 11 that can interact with 4 other systems, right? Cool animations. But essentially, if you have a system that interacts with other systems, you have exponentially scaled the amount of content and potentially added 40% to your content. And then when you continue doing that, you get into the rabbit hole of different systems and balancing them and doing counters if you're doing PvP games and handling exploits and playtesting. But you have to spend much less resource on producing this content. So you get essentially exponential returns on that. And this system-driven approach is directly correlated with the amount of time that people spend in your game, because things like UGC and I'm not sure if how many of you play Roblox, there's a lot of creativity there. So what types of games does this apply to? I'm just going to make a few examples here, and there are many more. Like I completely missed immersive sims here because I'm stupid, I guess. But Physics comedy, I think, was the first inception of this in the modern game development era. Games like Goat Simulator, Surgeon Simulator, or our own Toy Reliable Delivery Service are prime examples of systems-driven design. So, for example, in this game, Toy Reliable Delivery Service, it's very simple, very physics-driven, family-friendly, accessible. The goal is to deliver packages. You're essentially a terrible UPS driver or postal service driver that just throws packages into doors and destroys them. But the goal is to get packages there. So, for example, when we did a system to grab the packages, right, instead of picking it up, we did a system where you physically pick up the package has weight, and your character's weight shifts around. We're like, well, okay, can we pick up other players? Well, yes, you can. And can I pick up a player that is already carrying an item? Well, yes, you can. And then it just continues to scale. We go, okay, why don't we allow the system to then, when we added airplanes, just have this scene where someone is driving an airplane with one hand, with the other hand holding another character, and that character is holding a box, and then you're trying to deliver it. And this creates tens, hundreds of hours of content for people. It's multiplayer, it's co-op, it's very emergent and driven like that. Then the other one that is really obvious, to me at least, is roguelike/procedural games. Games like Streets of Rogue or Nuclear Throne by Rami. Those are prime examples where you can easily spend hundreds, thousands of hours. And when you go to these game pages on Steam, you will see that in reviews. The top uploaded reviews will have thousands upon thousands of hours. And these games, there was a wave of them, but then if you think about really, really good ones, there are few and far in between because they're really, really difficult to make. Like, we've been working on Streets of Rogue 2 with Matt, the designer of it, for several years now. And Binding of Isaac and a few others are the prime examples, but there are not like hundreds of them. Again, really, really difficult to make. The other example that recently saw a complete emergence with Among Us is what I call role-playing multiplayer games. You can call them social deduction games, you can call them mystery games, you can call them werewolf-like games. But essentially the premise there is that you have a group of players competing for a specific task, and one of the players is a traitor. Therefore, your gameplay system is actually designed around the social interaction of players lying to each other's face. And when you combine that with voice chat, that is a really interesting frontier. It creates a social element when, if you played board games like Mafia and you lie to someone's face, that anxiety feeling that you get from doing that, well, you can easily get that in multiplayer games. And I use Secret Neighbor as an example there because that's exactly what that game is. You have 5 players who are trying to sneak into a basement in the house. One of the players is a traitor. And it's up to the traitor to figure out how to deceive and lie their way into winning and killing off all the other people. A family-friendly game, by the way, kids getting kidnapped. And the one that I also spent a lot of time in, especially growing up, is simulation building games. Waiting for Cities Skylines 2 to get patched so it can run on my PC. But I've spent so many hours in these worlds, and it's pretty obvious how mods here impact them. So in the original Cities Skylines, or even the original SimCity from 2013, the one that got a lot of bad press, if you start from a game design perspective trying to analyze it, go to the modding scene of those games. Because in SimCity 2013, there are no one-way streets, there are no roundabouts. And when you play the vanilla version of that game, you go, okay, this is quite interesting, but I get why it's boring. You add one-way streets, play with that, and then you go roundabouts, then you go into event-specific cities, and add on more and more mods. And then if you really want to go into the rabbit hole, get City Skylines and get the mods where you can have a roundabout and you can micromanage each lane on the roundabout, where it goes and how it goes. And you can see how the way that I'm talking, like thousands of hours just waste there. But it also means that your game is being played a lot. Now, the one that I actually want to talk about in depth is the competitive PvP/open world survival games. People call them just survival games. It's games like DayZ, games like Rust, games like Deadside. Ark Survival Evolved is also one of them, and I'll have a full list of games at the end of this presentation that you should really, really check out. Now, has anyone played Rust here? Few hands. What about DayZ? Okay, so we have some people who will actually understand what I mean and will probably criticize me for my math again. So let's just dive into the Swiss knife of PvP systems-driven design. I should really trademark that. Now, in my opinion, in these style of games where you have an open world, they're usually first or third person, the main thing that defines them is a flexible definition of win. Because most of the time when you play a game, the game will tell you what is a win. Like, congratulations, you just won, you just beat this level. But when the player decides what's a win themselves, that's a really, really powerful feeling. And I think the genesis of this one, in terms of mainstream, was this little guy over here. Because who played Minecraft and remembers their first night when you don't build a shelter, right? And then you hear this motherfucker and he blows up what you were trying to build. You go, okay, I just lost that, but you've also won because you had that experience and you're learning from it. You go, oh, okay, this is how that works. And there was no explicit quest or guidance for you to build shelter. But because this guy's back in 2011, he would spawn at night. I haven't played Minecraft in a while. But then you go, okay, this is why you build shelter. Okay, how do I build that? Well, you have to chop down a few trees, you do this and that. Now, that was the genesis of emergent gameplay. And the second part here that is a little bit more complicated, and this is something that I argue with a lot with our design teams. It's about quests versus infinitely replayable events. So the mantra here is never spend time on something that the player will experience once. This would apply both to single-player design and multiplayer design, and especially in PvP style games. So you probably, like, I bet many people played World of Warcraft here and based some of their design decision-making based on that experience that they had. And I will touch upon World of Warcraft, but the idea here is you need to have enough randomly generated numbers in your equation of when people play your quests so they would be replayable as much as possible. So let's first define a quest of what we should not do. To me, it's a clearly defined objective, clearly defined reward, both defined by the game. That is a quest, right? And there are a couple of games that did this in quite an interesting way. Specifically, there's a game called V Rising. Has anyone played that? Quite a few. So you will probably remember if you played it when it launched, that you go, oh, it's a proper survival game. It's quite interesting. You essentially wake up as a vampire and then you can hide under trees, you can chop down trees, you can build your base, and you go, okay, this will play like Ark or like Rust. But there is a very defined quest system that did two things. One is that it was very easy to get into, unlike most survival games. So you had a lot of people playing it on launch and really loving it. And that quest system essentially created progression that was predefined by a bunch of designers. And this is a screenshot of just like, you go here, you craft a bone ring, and then you get that reward. And it created a few issues with that game. And I did reach out to the devs beforehand. Hopefully they replied to me and said that it's okay that I use this as an example. But my issue with that design was when you spawn on a server that is late in its wipe, essentially that there are already players on there, as a new spawn player, you absolutely have no way. Someone is calling me, probably spam. Yep, spam. Should really mute my phone. So when you are spawned into a world where other players already have progression, there is absolutely no way for you to cheese your way from 0 to hero. Like there is someone at level 50 transforming into a werewolf and just killing all of the new spawns. Now, without that, to me it just felt like, okay, well, what do I do? Oh, I need to go and do quests. No, I've done those quests already. They're all pretty linear. And without that excitement of replayability, it just became a matter of playing with friends. And then we all just went to play Valheim after about 80 hours in this game. But the benefit of a quest system is that you can get people into the game, get them to explore the world, and to really get into it. The drawback is that there is a really limited amount of time, and that is visible in the CCUs of this game. I really hope that they have an update that spices this up. And speaking of World of Warcraft, when you are designing MMOs, and I have this, like the content paradox was quests, trademark pending joke. The idea here is quite simple. Let's say you have an MMO, you designed 10 quests, quest 11 adds 1 hour and the same thing. The issue with essentially when you're operating a live service game, it doesn't have to be an MMO, it can be something else. You're operating it, you have a defined amount of content within it, right? You have spent a couple of years designing that content, you have established your pipelines, it's all great. The game launches, people love it, and then you get into the content grind of creating more content, quest number 11. Well, the shitty part here is that quest 11 is probably going to be much better than all of your previous quests because you have hired a good team, you have your pipelines established, you have essentially the knowledge that you didn't have when you started designing the initial 10 quests. And you grow as a professional by doing that because time passes. So the crappy part here is that as your team got better, the new players in your game that are starting on quest 1 or at level 1 or whatever you want to say it, they're getting a worse experience than the players that are now experiencing your late game content. But you're not creating a better quality of life for the new players whose expectations are growing because they're playing other games as well that may have better input, may have better onboarding or tutorials. So this is the paradox that I'm talking about. And this is also when a lot of teams get into, okay, well, we're going to create new content over here. We're going to hire a bunch of people. We're going to train them on redoing the old content because now it's kind of crap. Also, we need to test all of this and we need more game designers. And suddenly you're 70 people working on a single project. And then the economy collapses and, well, now we're here. I feel like this kind of approach can be fully fixed with systems-driven design that I'm talking about. And now to my favorite part, explaining oil rig to non-Rust players. Anyone get how difficult that is amongst the Rust players? No? Okay, so in Rust, there is a monument. A monument is a place that was designed by the game designers and then placed in the world procedurally. It depends on the map size, on where it gets placed, but essentially you have an island and offshore there are these oil rig platforms that spawn really, really good loot, right? There are 3 main ways of how to get there. I'll just talk through the math here, right? So you can get a boat, it's 125 scrap, and I'll convert everything to scrap, which is like the in-game currency just for simplicity. You can get a diving kit, which is about 75, 200, and then you can get a mini, which is between 750 and 125. Now, in an hour in the game, if you're really good at the game, you'll be getting about 1,000 scrap on average. And I am just simplifying it because you need a base, you need to get some armor, you need to research your tech tree and whatnot. But this is kind of like the basic. You can get to oil rig in 3 different ways, right? Then you need an armor set, which is about 4,000 plus scrap if you want to research it, if you want to get all of the materials for it, if you want to get the components. Then you need to get a red card, which is a progression thing that sends players to different parts of the map, which is about 1,600 scrap. Then you need to research your guns, you need medications, you need ammo, that's another 3,000. Then you also need a base because by the time you have all of this loot, you are a target and you didn't even go to this monument yet. You also need to build a huge base where you house that mini-copter, and that will take you between 3 and 8 hours. So fully prepared to go to this monument, you invest 15, 20 hours. If you're okay at the game, I can feel how some Rust players in the comments right now are screaming, yeah, I can do this in like 1 hour. Yeah, I can't, I'm old. But this is assuming that 1K scrap is 1 hour. So now imagine, you spend 15, 20 hours on getting there, right? You have all of this kind of equipment, and then someone It's called the Grub Kit, with spend 30 minutes just swimming there naked with like this pistol that is just one shot they just got on the server, and have a real chance to kill you and get all of that loot. Imagine how much that hurts for a second. This is when like I just threw keyboards out the window. Like, like those memes when I don't get angry playing a game, but I get angry playing this. But imagine how it feels for the new player that is there. That anxiety when you pull off essentially a zero to hero story, that makes you want to play this game for hundreds and hundreds of hours every month, going into thousands and tens of thousands. Now, this is why I believe in systems-driven design, player progression should never be tied to XP bars or levels or unlocks. It should be player loot that you have, that you can't lose, and you should be able to lose it, and player skill. So this is just one of the examples in games like DayZ or Rust or our own Deadside, where you can go from level 1 to level 60, essentially skipping full progression. This is not possible in traditional MMOs, not in Guild Wars, not in World of Warcraft, and these are the best stories. Like if you Google for some of the most popular Rust videos, you'll see like solo versus clan, like the little guy taking out the big corporation. These are all power fantasies that are real, that also drive the marketing for these style of games. And then you add systems on top of it. I just used a very basic example, right, of 3 ways to get there, but actually there are so many more that have been added over the past couple of years. There is a submarine which can shoot torpedoes. Those torpedoes are the counter for this large tugboat, which can actually be your floating base. And then you also have a large helicopter that can fit like 8 people, and they just recently added parachutes. Right, so parachutes as a system just changes the whole game. It changes the way that bases are built. It changes the way that people traverse the game, and adds more and more systems to, well, to how to get to that specific monument, but also to every single other one. Now, this gives players the ability to craft their own stories, which I believe is the fundamental part here, because a lot of us grew up playing more guided games where we're told what to do, right? Like I grew up playing a lot of PlayStation exclusives, and I absolutely love those story-driven experiences. And to me, those are kind of they're the pause game. I take a break from my normal game of DayZ, for example, to play The Last of Us, to play Spider-Man. I'll play it for a weekend, and then I'll come back to playing the other game for the full year. Now, these are the games that I highly recommend you guys play to get what I'm talking about, because doing this in a presentation is one thing. But I already mentioned Deadside, Rust, DayZ, Streets of Rogue. I think Unturned is a phenomenal example. It's a game that you've probably seen on Steam multiple times and you go, oh, what is this? Why is everyone playing? Oh my God, how many people are playing it? It's a really good game. Minecraft, if you haven't played it yet. Now, V-Rising I mentioned, and Project Zomboid is a really, really interesting one, because it takes that idea that your loot and your skill is your progression to a whole new level, where you are fighting off a deeply simulated top-down zombie apocalypse. Now, if you played it a few years ago, I highly recommend you get into it, because it's changed in a way that got me hooked for a very, very long period of time. And once you've done all of that, I suggest you watch a couple of YouTubers for Rust. So this screenshot is outdated. I think the video is now over 2 million views. But essentially, within 3 days, a Rust video from a 2 million subscriber YouTuber called Blueprint got 1.7 million views. They watched a video. I'm not sure if you can see how long it is. It is 3 hours, 46 minutes, 55 seconds long. It's longer than some of Zack Snyder's movies. And yeah, 1.7 million people watched it in 3 days. That's, I did the math, I'm probably wrong, but that's 6 million hours, which is 265,000 days or 720 years in time spent watching this video. This makes no sense right? We live in a world where people are TikTok, like 3 seconds time span, yet this happens. And I believe that the reason it happens is because people understand the real emotional pain that they experience in these style of games, and they're so committed to just watching someone go through this, that this drives so much marketing, so much exposure, and then people get these style of games. And to conclude with what I believe is the first example of me doing quote-unquote emergent gameplay is, come on, who hasn't drowned their sim in the pool? We all did. Let's accept that. So to wrap up, think systems instead of content. Think events instead of quests, and always allow the player's skill to be that player progression. Happy to talk about how to design these style of games, and thank you so much. My contacts are right here.
Alex, thank you so much. We have time for some questions now. Does anyone have
the awkward pause when everyone is thinking of questions, and then we're like, oh, please ask questions. I think I explained it so well that no one has any questions.
I might have one question or two for you. When you talked about the MMOs and having your team kind of be a little bit on that content treadmill focused on the late game, do you have some mitigation tricks for those who are already knee-deep in the mud?
Yeah, so we actually had an example recently where we have a story-driven game that has some sandbox elements, but it's a single-player story-driven game. And we were able to find a couple of mechanics that late game are mostly user-generated content, as in players can now build stuff. And we found a relatively straightforward way to integrate that system into the earlier levels of the game, which makes it a very different game, but it achieves what I've been talking about here, that now players who experience the game, they don't need to get to the late game content to get to the systems that we have added at that late game. And also it added a whole bunch of amount for experimentation within the game itself.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Oh, we have a question there.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I wanted to ask a bit of it's slightly lengthy question. I have a friend who's actually also a designer for a 4X grand strategy game, which also operates on similar principles as games you described, right? Like players craft their own stories. But his case is he tried making his 4X strategy game based around a specific scripted narrative. Which led to certain conflicts and some players not being extremely happy about the fact that this game that's supposed to help them generate events and craft their own story has something linear within it. Do you think there is a case where a linear story can be implemented well in a game like Rust or a game like Project Zomboid? Or do you think linear stories in such kinds of games should be abandoned altogether?
Short answer is no, I don't think there is a space for that. I think there is a lot of space for environmental storytelling and essentially putting story bits and pieces as puzzles in the game world, right? You can learn about the world, you can learn about what happened before you got there, right? But when you as a player are playing it, it's your story to craft, right? So it's kind of like contradicting perspectives there. You're trying to let players build their own story, but you're also trying to force them into a narrative. It's kind of like you should allow the players to decide if they're doing bad or not. I'm quoting Warren Spector from this morning. It's about you will know if you're doing well, you will know if you're doing not so well, and you will also want to tell other people about what you decided to do and what the outcome of that was. Trying to force a story on there, no, I think it's a different genre.
Hello. You've been talking about V-Rising that has this system that is not really replayable, but guides the player through all of the systems, meta layers of the game, etc. And then there's Rust that is very like new player unfriendly, I would say. You're learning through pain quite a lot. Do you think there's a way to incorporate like, let's not say linear progression, but first-time user experience systems in multiplayer sandbox games that makes sense and is fun?
Yeah, I've seen people try it a lot, and I think Ark Survival Evolved got close enough because they have like a task list and then it kind of opens up. Last Oasis did it really well. It's a game by a Polish developer where you have these like walking, like kinematic machines that are your base. So they actually had a quite nice tutorial. But I think the way to do it is, for new players, is to highlight modded servers. Because how I learned to play games like that is I just go to like a 10-time server where loot is available, right? So you learn how the weapons work, how this works, and then the stakes are much lower. And then you go into the pain, which is the vanilla of versions of those games without the mods. So no ideal answer there, but check out Last Oasis. It's done that really well.
Hello, Alex. It was awesome speech, and I have a question regarding integration of new systems to your like projects, games, etc., your sandboxes, because we had like in our projects a lot of struggling while we're trying to integrate new systems. So,
can you describe the project?
It's kind of the city builder project.
Okay, so
yeah, and when we was trying to create over there kind of tournaments between cities, it was too many like hints from the players that they can reach the goal and avoiding like the difficult part. So it was difficult to balance, to create to work these tournaments in proper way and to show that you have like best economics than another cities.
Yeah, so you're talking about just game balance, right? Essentially when you have a lot of systems, and just go into the Counter-Strike playbook and see how essentially traditional first-person shooters balanced it, right? You go, you take all of the data, you go, what is the meta that people have? Like, what's the most popular weapon? Why is it popular? Because probably the kill-death ratio with that weapon is very high. Nerf that weapon. Wait a week, see what happens. Then take the current most used item weapon system, nerf it. Players hate it because when you read patch notes, yeah, we have nerfed this, like boo. But what you will see is your average time spent will actually start growing. Because on average, people will not be abusing a system and they will be playing it more fairly. In city builders, I've never worked on one, so I don't know how to balance those. But in competitive games, it's usually what is the most abused item? What is like, what is the strategy?
Silver bullet, yeah.
What?
To remove silver bullet.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. It was all in all like data-driven development, guys.
Great. Do we have more questions?
Yeah, I think it's almost beer o'clock. Oh, we have one over there.
What do you think of roguelike games and the way they improve, work on replayability?
Well, roguelike games are, I'm not smart enough to design them, but I play them a lot. And it feels like that's kind of like the genesis for these style of replayability games. I have no idea how to design them though.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for the talk. A lot of the games that you mentioned at the end were, in your perspective, good examples of games that are designed for thousands of hours. A lot of them rely on multiplayer engagement, right? Playing online. Do you think indies should try to design their games to be played mainly as online multiplayer experiences, or do you think that they should consider that risk and maybe go for a single-player experience?
Yeah, so I was going to say that Streets of Rogue is single player, but no, it's actually co-op online. But to me, online multiplayer, especially after the pandemic, it has become kind of vital in any decision making, because it used to be that people over 30 here will remember how you used to gather in each other's houses and have LAN parties or like play local co-op. That doesn't happen anymore. What happens is a hybrid of local, in rare cases, mostly with families, co-op, and then mostly online multiplayer. And then when you get on Discord with your boys every night, you go like, hey, where are we playing? Where are we dropping, right? And I'm just seeing how a lot of kids that grew up playing games like Minecraft or Fortnite are now exploring other games as they get into their teenage years and late teens. So to me, that is a huge opportunity, and we're also seeing that with data in our own portfolio, that the longest, best long-tail selling games do have multiplayer in them. And also, when you have content interaction, the social interaction between players creates content, you as a designer need to work less, essentially. You just need to work on the balancing part of it, seeing who's abusing what tools. So yeah, I do think that multiplayer is the way to go, but I do see other genres, right? Like simulation, that's one that I also absolutely love.
Great. Any further questions? Oh, we have another question in the back there.
Sorry, fortunately I couldn't see the whole presentation, but I have a question. I'm not sure if it was tackled here, but some single-player puzzle games regard and have in focus in their level design the balance between, or it's not a balance, it's the wave sign of tension and releasing the player from this tension. So in these games you are presenting as an example, how can this be conveyed, or regarding that this has some co-op or social interaction, how can this tension, or does it be present in this?
Okay, well, if you play a game like Deadside and you like go on a mission, like let's say there is a helicopter that crashed and there's a bunch of bots that have high tier loot, you start knocking those bots out, you get their loot, but you've also revealed your location and there are 5 other people tracking you now. The anxiety and the adrenaline that you feel when you have all of this loot on you and you're running through the forest, like same thing happens in DayZ as well, and you're running towards the safe zone or your base, that if you get there and you just hear gunshots behind you and you lock the door and you feel safe, that's the coziest feeling in the world. You just get a fire going in your base and you just sit there and chill while there is chaos outside. And it's really difficult to describe until you have felt it yourself, right? The danger of losing your loot, essentially losing your progress that you've made for that hour or however long you were on that mission, that to me is much more powerful because it feels real. And then you make real friends, you make real enemies along playing these games that, like, I've met people in games like this 10 years ago and we're still playing together. And we do migrate between these style of games. So I think the target audience here is very multiplayer, and there is a lot from the traditional game design space of the tension and then the release and whatnot that applies here. It's very unscripted and very unpredictable. And yes, a lot of new players, like someone asked here, will cry because there's no tutorial.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's give it up for Alex again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.